Under the best conditions, garbage dumps are a growing problem for metropolitan areas. Land suitable for sanitary landfill simply is not available in crowded areas. In Tarrant County, the situation, the natural problems, have been compounded by petty politics and occasional corruption. The way it has been run in the past, the garbage business in Tarrant County has been a big business, and it has allowed some individuals to profit at the expense of the public health. I have just spent a month investigating the Tarrant County dump ground business and what ails it. I have found cases involving payoffs to public officials, and I have found influence peddling all the way to the top echelons of the county government. In two reports, Monday and Tuesday nights, we're going to examine some of these cases and the apparent reluctance of some county officials to do anything about them. This is Tommy Ayers reporting from Tarrant County for Channel 8 News.
We've reached a point where we have to think clearly and act clearly in the interests of the human species. It's not going to be enough, it seems to me, to point to the danger. It becomes important now to develop a plan for action. 10 years ago, a plan for action might have consisted of taming a few chimneys, of industrial chimneys or power plant chimneys, or taming the exhausts of automobiles. But this is not going to be enough now. It's not going to be enough to do this on the city level. It's not going to be enough to do it on the state level or on the national level. We're really talking about a world problem. The Atlantic Ocean, for example, is within about 20 years of becoming a dead body of water, which is to say the process of photosynthesis that supports life in the oceans is in danger of being altered and perhaps destroyed. And this in turn is part of the total chain of life. The fish help to support the people of Japan, for example. It becomes their main item of food. Now, the moment you begin to take out and destroy a principal source of food, such as fish, and then you suddenly discover that you're adding to the world's population by let's say 1 billion every few years, and then you're going to double the population supply in the world in 10 years, and yet cut the food supply in half, you can see how all these problems are interrelated. Now, if we examine, therefore, the most important problems facing all of us as human beings on this earth, not as Americans or as English or as Russians or as Chinese, I think we would find that the main problems we're facing are these: the problem of war and peace. Are we going to be able to keep the human race from destroying itself in a nuclear war? Second, the problem of overpopulation. Are we going to have too many people in relationship to the source of food and our resources? Third, the problem of environmental contamination, pollution of air and pollution of water. Now, if we examine problems such as these, we see that they all have one thing in common, which is to say they are world problems, but we do not have a world mechanism to deal with them.
When I was on a preaching mission in Africa several years ago, the Christians were increasingly finding it impossible to reach those people, and the Muslims were making 10 converts for our one. Now the situation has completely turned around, and the Christians are now making converts at the rate of 10 to 1 in our favor against the Muslims. And Africa, black Africa, is becoming increasingly Christian. The greatest Christian hope in the world is black Africa today.
On July 22, 1969, at the instruction of Tarrant County Commissioner Dick Anderson, the persons responsible for the operation of this sanitary landfill or garbage dump were told that if they continued to charge the public for dumping here, county-owned equipment and personnel would be pulled off the property. Now, 6 months later, it comes to light that the same citizens who pay tax dollars to help keep this place running are still paying for the privilege of dumping trash here. Commissioner Anderson told me he will ask the sanitation department to pull county equipment out of here and to keep it out. Unfortunately, many of the problems surrounding Tarrant County dumps aren't quite that easily resolved. In fact, the situation is not only physically bad, it is politically a little uncertain, too. Channel 8 investigative reporter Tommy Ayers has tracked down some almost unbelievable connections between politicians and private enterprises dealing with loaned credit cards, peddled influence, and countless thousands of tax dollars. His reports will begin on Monday afternoon on the expanded Channel 8 News Report. They'll be run both on the 5:30 to 6:30 newscasts and on the 10 o'clock newscasts, and they should prove quite interesting. Jerry Taft, Channel 8 News, reporting.
Paul L. Dunbar Community Learning Center here in Dallas is in the process of initiating a new preschool program. The program, when it gets underway a few days from now, will involve 32 youngsters, 16 3-year-olds and 16 4-year-olds. Today I talked to early childhood consultant Frances Allen about the screening process for the program.
We're going to take children of the most deprived families. This criteria was established by the people on the site at Paul L. Dunbar. That's the principal, the director, the people in the early childhood program. But they're considering taking the children that probably need it the most.
Can you describe the role of the parents in this program, or is there a role for the parents?
Yes, there's a definite role. We are convinced that parents must work with us. The child doesn't just stop his learning when the school bell rings in the afternoon. We want parents to know what we're trying to do with their children and to help us. We feel that their interest will make a big difference in the child's academic success. Now, 2 of the programs have a built-in parental involvement program where the teacher actually goes into the home, not as a social worker, but as a teacher, to show parents what they might use in the home to help teach their child some of the things that we're trying to do at school.
The Food and Drug Act requires ingredients to be listed on packaged food products. It says nothing about moisture or the percentage of ingredients. As a result, in the case of all meat sausage, the percentage of lean meat can be as low as 6%. 50-something can be fat, 30-something moisture, about a half for spices, and you end up with 6% meat in all meat sausage. Sausage is the worst product in the meat line, but weenies can be up to half fat and moisture, and some rather alarming amounts there simply because the percentage is not required. Another fraud that's very common in the repair industries, primarily televisions, cars, and all, is the gimmick called lowballing, where they look the piece of equipment over and decide that this is wrong and that is wrong, and it should be, well, I give you an estimate of this amount. And then when they get the mechanic's lien on it, which gives them the legal ownership of the thing, all of a sudden they add on a whole lot more, and your bill goes from a water pump to a new transmission in no time. And this is purely an enforcement problem that in many areas the district attorney's office has obtained cars that are used, look used, but are in fantastic shape except for 1 or 2 items, and simply wheel them in there and wait for the vendor to take the bait. Mm-hmm. And when they take the bait, boom, then the consumer gets protection. But I haven't encountered any of that going on around here lately.
city like Dallas, who has not reached that total point yet? What do's and don'ts do you recommend?
Well, I hope the people of Dallas will really realize that I came in a neighborly fashion, and everything that's happened to me has been good, and I don't want to propose to say to Dallas what Dallas should do. This is one of the mistakes all of us are making, trying to tell the other what to do. But I think that in having had such a beautiful experience with Congressman Cabell and feeling so good about Dallas as I do, I would only want to say this: whatever you're doing, keep on doing it, but do look very carefully at the aggravating problems that are coming upon the cities now, and look at your problem comprehensively. I mean by that, particularly in the area, and this is what we're talking about so much, in the criminal area, I think we've neglected to understand systems. We've neglected to understand root causes, and I think that what happens, as I have experienced it, both having worked in New York, I directed the housing program, as you may know, there, and in Washington as mayor. These problems come upon you so fast, you're not psychologically equipped to deal with them. And we're finding that now. We're finding that in the area of narcotics, it's a fantastic problem, deep in its roots and scope, and we just weren't prepared for it. And I hope that any city that's not reached the point that some of the eastern cities have reached will begin to psychologically gear for what could happen.
It's been purely a matter of communication. The things go on. Everybody, first of all, assumes it only happens to them. Then they figure, well, no, it's bound to happen to somebody else, but they have no idea who it is. And so there's been no way that you can really get organized together, sort of a fellowship of fellow victims, or this type of thing, in order to do something about it. And this is one of the things the Texas Consumers Association is wanting to do with our local organizations. is to provide this interchange of ideas, as well as through the state organization. What happens in El Paso could easily happen here.
When you talk about industry and businesses who are abusing the consumer, how many, are you talking about a great majority of the businesses, or how many?
At least not by intent. Now, in some areas, the competitive situation is so tight that the fact that one or two businesses will take unfair advantage of the consumer fairly well forces some of the others who would rather not, simply to stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
In other areas, the competition isn't quite as tight, and so it stays more the minority. I think intrinsically it is a minority operation, though unfortunately in some areas they have enough leverage in the marketplace through this competitive advantage to force the others to be equally dishonest.
Do you know who these dishonest ones are?
Well, I know some of them.
What are the greatest holes in the president's proposals to fight crime?
Well, I don't know that I see any holes. I think the problem now is getting the resources. As he indicated, 13 bills have gone to Congress, none of them have passed at this point. I think the difficulty is not so much what the hole is, it's what is understanding the dimension of the problem. I think for the first time we're beginning to attack narcotics, which in our cities all over the nation now is because it's a serious problem. And I mean, we've been fighting it as if it didn't exist, really hitting a giant with a feather. Just in the narcotics area alone, the cities have now, and our city particularly, is coming to grips with it with a whole host of legislation, with a whole host of thrusts. I think that from my standpoint, there are only two ways to get at this. One, to get the system and understand that it is a system and deal with it from law enforcement, from correctional reform and in terms of rehabilitation of inmates, assure speedy trials, which is constitutionally guaranteed, but most courts are not functioning, reform to some degree of your bail system, and to get all that cranking, and then at the same time recognize that there are root causes and try, as your resources will, to attack those root causes.
In numbers of students, we will be increasing the size of the university slowly. We do not expect to become a large institution. We want to keep it of a size that we can still handle things reasonably well. I think there's a premium to be found in operating an institution of relatively small size, small as compared with the giant institutions I mean now. The main thrust of the campaign is quality. It's a much overused word, but there's no substitute for it. We are moving up. This is one way we say it. Everything that we do, we want to do better tomorrow. Financially, the main thrust of the campaign is for increased endowment. No institution can really be the master of its own fate unless it has real control over some corpus, some major funding. Endowment is very important. We have a substantial endowment, but it has declined as a percentage of our expenditure, and we're going to try to rectify that balance.
Well, we've more or less dedicated ourselves to bring Major League Baseball to this area, and we've held on for a long time, and I guess a few more months or a year or two wouldn't make any difference.
Did you talk to Daly while you were in Florida?
No, I did not. I didn't have anything to talk to him about.
When was the last contact either of you had with him?
I talked to him the day before I went to Florida, and I can't remember when that was now.
About Thursday.
About Thursday, I believe it was. We had a very congenial conversation. Lamar's covered one point here that we've never really covered before, and that is that we have been invited to attend the meeting. This is the first time we've officially admitted that we've had an invitation from two different sources to attend the meeting.
It's not just any car. This is $25,000 worth of automobile, including the equipment inside, and it belongs to the Texas Transportation Institute, a branch of Texas A&M. Bob Whitson is going to explain to us just what this car is all about. What do you do with $25,000 worth of automobile?
Well, you can, first of all, we measure the distance that we travel on the freeway. We measure the fuel consumption that the automobile is using. We measure the number of times that the brake is applied, the time that we're traveling on the freeway, and from this information we can calculate several more parameters that the car is actually, how it's actually operating.
What good does it do, have all this information?
Well, it gives us a means of measuring the effectiveness that we're determining from the freeway operation. With, as we call it, a floating vehicle, we are trying to measure just what the average driver is experiencing as he travels from work to home in the evenings and from home to work in the mornings.
Is this going to give us better freeways in the future?
It certainly should. It should at least give us a good way of determining how well the freeway is operating.
Okay, Bob, why don't you show us how it works then?
Accelerate now, we'll check our fuel consumption. Okay, now apply your brakes and we'll check the brake application. It's about 55. We'll probably have to calibrate a little bit.
What all this data is eventually going to be used for is the system of controls on entrance ramps on North Central Expressway. That system is expected to go into effect in the early part of this summer. This is Phil Reynolds, Channel 8 News on North Central Expressway.